Hale, today we are going to talk about our final way that we can collect data. So far we have talked about simulating scenarios to collect some data. We have talked about doing surveys using random sampling and how that could go wrong. And we have talked about performing observational, prospective, retrospective observational studies. And so finally, let's talk about experiments, something you probably have some experience with or some understanding about. So in the observational study lesson, we talked about these dogs and cats that were dying of or getting sick and sometimes dying of liver. I believe it was liver failure. And so what they did find out that there was some contamination in the food that they were all eating. And so of course the manufacturer has to go back and they have to fix that problem. And so they want to make sure that their new food is safe. And so the way we do that is through an experiment. So in an experiment, we need to make sure that we are hitting some required elements. We need to have some control. One of the first and maybe only things in this short video about observational studies I said was we don't have any control during an observational study. We are not influencing what's happening. In an experiment, we are very purposefully influencing what's happening. We are controlling the scenario. And most of the reason we do that is we're trying to get rid of any bias. We want to have things that we can compare directly to. We always want to have random sampling when we're sampling. Randomness or randomizing in an experiment is a bit different. Typically for experiments we need volunteers, and so we're not getting a random sample. But what we can do is we can randomly assign participants, usually people, maybe in this case animals, to we can randomly assign them to groups. So in this case, we probably will want to have two groups, a group that eats the old food and a group that eats the new food. So we're going to have two groups. And one group will have old food, one group will have new food. And so this gives us a level of control. We're controlling what is being eaten. In fact, I'm going to walk this back just a little bit. I don't think we want to give it that contaminated food. I think we want to give it some other food. Let's not contaminate these poor dogs and cats. That's not nice. And so we want to know if over a period of time, if our new food is keeping our dogs and cats as healthy as another food that we know to be safe. We would not want to give it to the contaminated food. Mr. Pickard, please don't do that. So this is our control. We're controlling what the animals eat. Our randomization comes in where we would randomly assign, if we have volunteers, hey, I would like my pet to participate in this study. Usually you're compensated for that. We would randomly assign these animals to either get the new food that we're trying to make sure is safe or some other safe food. So that's where the randomization comes in. So we will randomly, we often call this random assignment. So we're not randomly sampling our animals, but we are randomly assigning them to what we call a treatment. These are called treatments. In this case, I have two treatments. I have this new food we're testing out, and I have some other food that we know is already safe. Replication comes in when I can repeat the experiment. And in particular, replication in this scenario would be having multiple animals in each treatment group. We would probably like about the same number. And so replication is being able to do this with multiple participants. And then we might want to repeat this, actually repeat the entire experiment again. But in general, replication comes with being able to have multiple participants in our treatment groups. As far as experiments are concerned, 1 through 3 are absolutely required. You must have control to have a appropriate experiment. You must have random assignments, and you must be able to replicate the experiment. We would not want to give the new food to one pet and another known to be safe food to one pet and just have 2 pets. We want to have multiple pets in each group, probably multiple cats and dogs in each group, um, so we can replicate this experiment to try and limit any bias within our groups that we cannot control for. Sometimes there are things we can't control for, which we'll talk more about later. The last one that is helpful but is not always required is blocking. Blocking is putting participants into groups based on characteristics. It's a bit like if you think of stratifying, uh, where we would want to separate participants out because of some characteristic they have in common. In this example, we might want to block based on the type of pet. So we might want to run this experiment with dogs and separately run the experiment with cats. We will talk more in more detail about blocking in a follow-up lesson next time. But for now, you should understand control, randomization, and replication are paramount. They are required, and we could do some blocking if we need it, which we'll talk more about later. So I want you to pause this here, take a minute and read this, and then we will discuss how we could design an experiment to test this fertilizer. Okay, so you might be wondering where some of the information is, and this is from the book. We don't need all the information from the book. What we do need to know is the scenario where we have this plant fertilizer, OptiGrow, and we've made this claim that it makes juicier, tastier tomatoes, whatever that means. And so we want to run an experiment to provide evidence or prove that that's true. And this is a good time to talk that the only way to prove that something is true, that something has a relationship, is through an experiment. And so we are concerned with a full dose as they prescribe or a half dose. And so we are going to end up with 3 treatment groups. We are going to have a treatment that gets a full dose of OptiGrow. We're going to have a treatment that gets a half dose of OptiGrow. And then we are going to have a treatment that uses, I'm going to say, no OptiGrow. So we are controlling how much fertilizer these tomato plants get. Some get none, some get a half dose, and some get a full dose. So that is where our control comes in. We also have a control group, so we'll call this no OptiGrow a control group. We don't always have to have a control group, but in this case we do. This is a control group because this is one that's not getting any of the fertilizer. We'll talk more about like different factors in the next lesson, but a factor is the different things that you're trying to control for. We're only controlling for one thing right now, and that would be the level of fertilizer we get. So my factor is the fertilizer. And I don't believe it says how many tomato plants we have. Let's pretend there are 30. Let's pretend we have 30 plants. And so we could create this this figure here. So I'm going to start with my 30 plants. And then I'm going to randomly assign 10 plants to each group. So my control comes with The control comes with the 3 treatments and how much fertilizer they get. Randomization comes with randomly assigning these 30 plants to three different treatments. So each one of them is equally as likely to be getting a full dose, a half dose, or none. And then my replication comes in the fact that I have 10 plants in each group, so I've replicated each treatment 10 times. So here I would have a full dose, half dose, and I'm just going to say none for now. And so then what we would do is we would see how they grow, and we would run some sort of test to determine their juiciness and tastiness. I'm not 100% sure how we determine juiciness and tastiness, but we would compare the results. And based on these results, we could say that the OptiGrow does give us juicier, tastier tomatoes, or it doesn't. So again, control is in the treatments. Randomization is in randomly assigning the plants to the treatment. And the replication is in the fact that we can do this on 10 plants for each treatment. We could do more if we wanted to, but 10 seems like a pretty good number. So if you do have questions, please do ask. As always, please do stick around for the problems at the end, and take your time on those, and good luck.